I watch her. Her name is Charity Frost, and today she is 16. The perfect age for a rebirth. On this, her 16th birthday, the man she was forced to call Dad for 12 miserable years finally played his part. A $10 bill, crumpled and thrown at her face. "Get out," he snarled. "I'm done paying for another man's trash." Such a beautifully crude creature. He thought those words were venom. He truly believed they would break her, that a pathetic $10 and the slam of a cheap door would be her final scene. He was a fool. He had no idea this was her true beginning, my beginning. I watched her bend, graceful as a willow, and retrieve the note. Her eyes, cold and clear, locked onto his. A smile, my smile, touched her lips as she handed him the sealed envelope, the one I instructed her to keep for 2 years. "I know everything," she said. "My perfect, brilliant girl." He tore it open with his grubby hands. The color drained from his face, a lovely, satisfying pallor, as his eyes scanned the contents. His gaze then drifted to the window, and his entire body went rigid. Because outside, cutting through the thick Spokane snow, my machine waited. A black Range Rover, silent and dark against the curb. The driver's door opened. I stepped out, tall, dressed in a coat as dark as my intentions. I began my slow, deliberate walk toward my house. Now, before I explain precisely who I am and why, the sight of me made her so-called father look as if he was staring into his own open grave. I have a question for you. If you are listening to my voice right now, leave a sign in the comments. Tell me your city, and tell me the hour of the night. I assure you, I read every last confession. And tell me this, has destiny ever come knocking on your door, ready to claim what was always its own? Lean closer now, because the scene that was about to play out in that suffocating little living room happened next in that living room, changed the entire game. But before we get to that, I need to pull you back with me, back to how it all started. I see every frame of the day her old life was erased. The snow fell like a curtain over Interstate 90, the year she turned a fragile 4. A tiny, oblivious thing, making crayon marks on paper at the kitchen table when the call came. I watched Vicky answer, her expression a blank slate waiting for the chisel. Then, the receiver slipped from her fingers, a sharp crack in the silence. No tears, not yet, just a hollow, vacant stare at the floral wallpaper. She was a statue, until the crunch of Lester's boots announced his arrival from the garage. He saw her face, and in that one look, he understood the world had been rearranged. Her parents were a memory, black ice, a semi-truck. A beautifully brutal, instantaneous conclusion. The funeral was a muted, pathetic affair. I watched her get lost inside a navy coat, 2 sizes too large for her small frame. She clung to Lester's hand for the duration, a lifeline thrown by the very architects of her storm. "He's your family now," the whispers cooed, sealing the pact. My family. He and Vicky stood at the front, a perfect performance of solemnity, with her placed between them, the centerpiece of their fabricated grief. The very picture of the grieving brother and his selfless wife, rising to the occasion. And the fools in the pews, they all bought the act. People kept repeating the same lie. They kept telling her how lucky she was. The irony was a poison I savored. They absorbed her into their nest on South Hill that very week. The first few years were a masterclass in deception. From the outside, it was a flawless portrait of normalcy. The Christmas cards arrived every year, featuring 4 perfectly manufactured smiles. Lester, playing the doting father, teaching her to ride a bicycle in the driveway. Vicky, her fingers weaving through the child's hair like a careful puppeteer, all for the first-grade pictures, every moment staged. And the final, perfect touch? She started calling them Mom and Dad, locking the door from the inside. She performed every task they assigned, a perfect little marionette, and no one ever thought to check the strings, to see if they were tangled. Then the boy, Knox, made his grand entrance when she was 6 years old, and just like that, the stage was flooded with new props. Toys appeared that were never meant for her hands. New clothes were purchased, but not for her skin. A new world was built around the infant, and she was left in the ruins of the old one. I watched that pathetic stuffed bear of hers, her one comfort, simply vanish into thin air. Her sanctuary, that small bedroom, was conquered and repurposed. It became the nursery, and she was banished to a smaller cell. At the far end of the house, a room that reeked of preservation and decay, the cloying scent of mothballs. By the time she was 8, the truth was a landscape she could no longer pretend not to see. The inequity was blatant. Knox was gifted a gleaming, crimson bicycle for Christmas, a monument to his worth. She was handed a sweater, a shapeless thing 2 sizes too large, a cheap insult pulled from the clearance rack. And when her small voice dared to ask why, Lester, the man she called a father, simply grunted, "You're older." His words were a dismissal. "You don't need as much." And Vicky, the mother, merely offered that razor-thin smile and sliced the conversation clean in 2. Her 9th birthday arrived and departed in absolute silence. It was a ghost of a day. No cake to commemorate it, no candles to light its passing, no hollow tune to mark her existence. I saw her sitting on that bed, a lonely sentinel counting the minutes to midnight, waiting for a reprieve that would never come. No one remembered. The wave of grief was so absolute, so physical, it forced its way out of her in the bathroom. And then I saw the first spark of the woman she would become. She cleaned it up, by herself. Not out of shame, but so they wouldn't have another reason to be angry at her pain. But the true moment of clarity, the real baptism, came during the winter she turned 10. A simple trip downstairs for a glass of water into the cold darkness of the house. That's when she heard them, muffled voices leaking from the kitchen. The room itself was unlit, but the hallway was illuminated by a single, sharp line of light, a glowing crack beneath the door. She crept toward it, a tiny shadow drawn to a damning truth. She pressed her ear against the cold wood, and the voice that cut through the silence was Lester's. Was a low rumble, the sound of a beast guarding its kill. The trust fund from her dead father, he specified, sits at a pretty 1.2 million, plus the life insurance payout, which conveniently elevates it to 16. His voice caressed the number. As long as we have her until she's 18, every single penny is ours to command. The state even slips us a little extra, a reward for playing the role of the parents. How quaint. No one ever looks closer. Then came Vicky. Her laugh was a thin, brittle thing. And once she's 18, then our duty is done. She can have the dregs, if there are any dregs left. Until that day, we just continue the performance of the perfect family. And that's when I saw her, a fragile silhouette against the dark. She was utterly still, a statue carved from fear. I watched the glass begin its slow motion fall from her grip. It struck the hardwood with a sound like a single, sharp scream, shattering the night's illusion. The kitchen light blazed on, pinning her in its glare. Lester's face appeared, a mask of cold fury. His eyes were not merely narrowed, they were weapons taking aim. "Go back to bed, Charity." He spoke her name, letting it drop into the silence like a stone. It was the first time I'd heard him use it not as an address, but as a cage, a threat. And in that moment, I watched the girl I knew begin to die, replaced by something new. She finally saw what she was to them, a gilded ledger, a walking, breathing account number, a treasure chest in human form. From then on, every saccharine smile for the prying neighbors, every carefully staged family portrait, every single hollow praise of good girl was simply a line in their script. And so, the real her retreated. She stopped asking for anything. She stopped dreaming of birthdays. She started watching, just as I do. She began listening, collecting their secrets like dark jewels, and waiting for the day she could burn their whole pathetic stage to the ground. Those venomous words from the kitchen became her new religion for the next 4 years. Sleep became a forgotten country to her. I watched her night after night. Every groan of the old house in the hallway would snap her awake. A soldier convinced the enemy was at her door, to gauge if my value had depreciated. So the little mouse began to scrabble, searching for the blueprint of the gilded cage her own so-called family had built around her. She called it being treated like an investment. So clever. I watched her rifle through every drawer, every dust-choked box in the pied attic, a little ghost, haunting the forgotten corners of her own life. Futile, of course. Until the week the clock struck 14. There she was, cleaning the spare closet, a perfect little Cinderella, on a task set by that odious woman Vicky, just before the holidays, and then her fingers, so unaware, brushed against the cold kiss of metal hidden in the deep dark. A small, unassuming grey lockbox, guarded by nothing more than a laughable, cheap padlock. And across it, a strip of yellowed masking tape, a forgery of her mother's hand I'd spent weeks perfecting, written in deliberately faded blue ink, "Open only when you're 14. I love you forever, Mom." I watched her carry it to her room like a holy relic, her heart a frantic drum. I could almost hear through my surveillance feed the sound of a trap being sprung, a paperclip and the wisdom of the internet, a YouTube tutorial, and the pathetic lock yielded in under 2 minutes. She has potential, and inside, just as I had left it, a single, thick envelope, nestled on velvet, the cream paper sealed with a blood-red wax. I saw her thumb break the seal. The sound was deafening. 3 pages, all it takes, dated 2 months before the spectacular crash. The timing was exquisite. My sweetest Charity, the ghost begins to speak. If you're reading this, I'm no longer there to protect. To you, an empty promise from a woman who couldn't even protect herself. Before I married your dad, I was in a brief relationship with a man named Reed Lawson. The name hanging in the air of her silent room, a seed planted long ago. We were young. It ended when he got engaged to someone else. Oh, the beautifully simple lie. I watched her face crumble. She thought that part of her history was a buried thing, a closed book, after 3 little months. Then, her eyes widened as she read the next line, the truth of her own beginning. A secret child. Her mother never told Reed, a sentimental, catastrophic mistake that set all of this in motion. And then the lie about marrying her so-called father, Lester, a pathetic attempt to build a fortress of normalcy, all to give her a family. I could see the bitter irony dawn on her as the ink bled the truth. Her mother saw the greed in Lester's eyes. I know that look. I've cultivated it in lesser men. She finally understands his obsessive talk about the trust, the way his voice always changed, and the insurance money. The prize he thought was his for the taking. Her mother's fear, a ghost in the machine. Her little hands trembled, clutching the paper. The dead woman's warning, he would try to seize control of everything that was meant for her. And now, she was finally learning the scale of it. The trust, $1,200,000. I saw the number register, a shockwave passing through her, a gift from the grandparents, bolstered by $400,000 more, a life insurance policy, a final, clever move from the grave, forged in her name and her name alone. Lester, the temporary gatekeeper, a wolf guarding the flock, but only until she turned 18, the age of her freedom. And then, a new name appeared on the page, a lawyer, Holly Beck, the mother's failsafe. Stationed in downtown Spokane, a silent guardian hired to watch the watcher, a respectable move. I watched her fingers fumble, finding the small card taped inside the lid, just as the letter promised. Quaint little relics were enclosed with it, a single strand of hair, a physical link to a memory. And the real prize, a copy of her true birth certificate, the one that rewrites her entire life. The father's name, a blank space, an empty throne, listed as unknown, a weapon left for her to wield. The letter gave her the key, the proof she would need to claim her real lineage. A tear finally escaped, tracing a path on her cheek as she read the final, sentimental words. A burden? No, my dear, you are an asset, her mother's miracle. A fitting title, but she has no idea what kind of miracle she truly is. All my love, Mom. She clutched the words. I counted. She read it 4 times, letting the poison and the promise seep into her soul until the words stopped blurring. Reed Lawson. The name finally crystallized in her mind. I saw the shadow of it cross her face, a name that was nothing to her, and yet it was the beginning of everything, a door to a world she can't imagine. Her eyes darted back to the box, to the business card for Holly Beck. resting exactly where the ghost said it would be. She secured it, the first piece of her new arsenal. The plan was already forming behind those terrified, beautiful eyes. The library computer the next day, so predictable, a foolish attempt at anonymity. She'd use a false name at first. It's a useless gesture. She has no idea that I'm always one step ahead. 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes for the first domino to fall. If you're Jennifer's daughter. The message beckoned, a siren's call to the truth she desperately craved. And of course, the little lost girl made the call. She always does what she's told. From a filthy payphone, reeking of desperation, outside a garishly lit grocery store. She thought she was being so clever, covering her tracks so they couldn't find her. "Darling, you've been in my sights all along." And then came the voice of Saint Holly, dripping with that feigned calm, that saccharine kindness I know so well. But beneath it, that familiar, tedious seriousness. Oh yes, she already suspected. The little cracks in the family fortune. She'd been watching them, just waiting for the dam to break. Waiting for my little pawn to make her move. And so she sent the instrument of revelation. A tidy little DNA kit, so clandestine with its missing return address. Theatrics. I watched her linger like a ghost, waiting for dear old Lester to leave his hairbrush behind. There it sat on the porcelain counter, amidst the steam of his morning ritual. Her hand, a nervous bird, darting out to pluck 3 silver strands, the precious roots still clinging. A perfect sample. She sealed them away, a secret whispered into an envelope, and sent it on its way. Dropped into a cold metal box on the other side of town. Then came the wait. 17 agonizing days for her, 17 amusing days for me. And then, a key turned in a lock. The results, nestled inside a sterile P.O. box. A little sanctuary arranged by her dear aunt. Inside, the cold, hard print began to sing its song. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Checkmate, Reed Lawson, my father. The words echoed in the silence as her whole world collapsed. She fled, of course, to the cold, tiled floor of a public library bathroom, a place for the broken and anonymous. She wept until she gagged on her own grief, a truly cinematic performance. And then, the curtain rose again. She wiped the tear tracks from her face, squared her little shoulders, and walked out into the light, straight to the one person she believed she could trust with a secret of this magnitude, so predictable. Snowheart, her shadow, her confidant, a friendship forged in the fires of 6th grade, the only one, with eyes sharp enough to see through the suffocating illusion of her perfect family. I watched as she laid out the artifacts of her broken life, the letter, the lab report, all of it. The other girl consumed the words in a heavy silence, the air crackling with the unspoken. Then came the inevitable embrace, a desperate, clinging thing, as if she could physically hold Charity's world together. I imagine it felt like an anchor in a storm. They wouldn't sleep, of course, not that night. They would just huddle on that bedroom floor, whispering plans into the darkness, unaware that I could hear every word. Their little whispers, their childish plots and promises, every venomous word they could conjure, for me and my Vicky. I watched the poison take root. After 10 years of my care, she chose a stranger over her family. So began the 2-year countdown, a clock only she thought she could hear ticking. I saw it all. That ghost, Reed, slithered into her inbox the very same night that meddling Holly sent him the proof of my failure. His opening salvo was a pathetic 4 words, words I had worked so hard to erase. Their little conspiracy began, so cautiously. A single message a week, then a trickle every few days. He played the patient saint, never demanding, never asking for a face or a voice until he knew she was hooked. And when she was finally ready, she sent him the picture. There she was, holding the very heart of her mother's secrets. His reply was a performance in a single, calculated voice note. His voice, catching on her name as if he had any right to it. He wanted to descend on Spokane immediately, but she, my clever little actress, begged him to wait. Because here in Washington, 16 is the magic number, isn't it? The age she could stand in a courtroom and try to tear me away from what is mine. If she could just convince them I was harming her precious interests. That wretched woman, Holly, had the papers all drawn up, of course. They were just waiting for their perfect, dramatic moment to strike. So they plotted. So quiet, so careful. And she kept playing her part in my house, offering those hollow smiles at all the right moments. She'd even pretend to help Knox and whisper, "Yes, Dad." And all the while, as I spoke to her, I knew she was counting down her 722 days. 721. 720. The morning she turned 16 arrived just as I'd planned. Grey, utterly silent. I made sure there were no balloons on that mailbox. No. The stage was set with such pathetic poetry. Pancakes, a single candle weeping wax. The boy, Knox, was safely out of the picture, tucked away at school. The mother, Vicky, was contorting herself in some sterile yoga studio, blissfully unaware. And there sat the king, Lester, perched on his throne at the kitchen island, clad in the armor of his bank suit, his world shrinking to the glow of his phone. And then my little puppet walked in. She was a vision of beautiful decay, wearing the same jeans and hoodie she'd likely slept in. He didn't deign to look up, such a predictable fool. Then, the gesture I'd been waiting for. He reached into his wallet, a tomb of leather and credit, and pulled out a crisp $10 bill. He didn't hand it to her. He flicked it. The paper skittered across the cold granite, a final contemptuous offering that landed at her feet. "Get out," his voice, a flat line on a heart monitor. "I'm done paying for another man's trash." The words, so carefully chosen to wound, were the very key she needed. He thought he was delivering a final blow, but she had been forging this moment for 2 years. She bent down, not with shame, but with the grace of a predator, and retrieved the bill. She folded it once, a neat, deliberate motion, and slid the insult into her pocket. Then it happened. A smile, the first true one to light that house in a decade, spread across her face. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. From the belly of her worn backpack, she drew the thick manila envelope. The end game. "I know," she told him, her voice a silken threat. He could only snort in his ignorance. "Know what exactly?" he sneered. She didn't have to say another word. She laid the envelope before him. Inside, the first cut, a temporary order bearing the seal of a Spokane County judge, signed less than a day before, effective immediately. The trap was sprung. Then came the killing blow, the certified DNA report, and for good measure, the petition, a litany of his sins, citing 12 years of fiduciary breach. I watched his fingers tremble as he tore it open, the first tremor of the earthquake. Page after damning page, his own fraudulent signatures stared back at him, a gallery of his own greed. And that's when the overture reached its crescendo. The doorbell rang, a sharp, clean sound cutting through the tension. Vicky was still gone. Knox was at school. Lester froze, a man trapped in the wreckage of his own life. I saw him through the lens, the old fool, fumbling with papers that were already ghosts. Then she moved, my Charity, sweeping past him as if he were a stone, to open the door herself. And there he was, the long-awaited variable, Reed Lawson, materializing on the porch. A charcoal coat cloaked his frame, snowflakes dying like tiny stars upon his shoulders. His legal weapon, Holly Beck, stood poised one precise step behind him. Her hand was fused to a briefcase, the very box that held all their fates. I watched his eyes find hers, a current of recognition arcing across the frozen air. The first time they had ever truly seen one another, a smile was an unwelcome, unnecessary thing. He didn't need one. He stepped inside, an invasion in slow motion. His boots bled melted snow onto the floor, a dark stain marking his claim on the house. Then he spoke the line I had written for him in my mind 1,000 times. The words she had undoubtedly prayed for over 730 miserable days. "I'm here for my daughter," he said, and his voice was the sound of a closing vault. Calm, inevitable. "You don't have any legal claim on her anymore." I watched Lester's jaw unhinge, a silent, pathetic betrayal of his shock. His mouth worked, a fish gasping for air, but produced nothing. The atmosphere in the room simply died. All oxygen vanished from the space, The instant Reed sealed them inside. He shut the front door, the click of the latch, a final, damning verdict. No one moved. No one dared to make their breathing a sound that could be heard. I zoomed in on the grandfather clock, a silent observer just like me. Even its heavy pendulum seemed to pause, caught between 1 second and the next. There stood Lester, the defeated king, clutching the paper that had once been his crown. He stared at the guardianship order as if its words had dissolved into a meaningless scrawl. His mouth opened, then closed, a grotesque pantomime of protest. It opened again, and still, no sound came to his defense. Nothing but a small, wretched noise, like that of a trapped animal. It was then Holly made her move. 2 sharp clicks from her briefcase cut through the silence with surgical precision. It was the practiced calm of someone who had dismantled lives like this at least 100 times. She placed the first exhibit on the coffee table, the opening salvo. It was a folder of dark green leather, trimmed in gold, a beautiful coffin for Lester's hope. The glint off the golden, embossed seal of Spokane County Superior caught the light as the document glided across the glass, a ship sailing toward its inevitable wreck. Every damning page was perfectly aligned for his eyes. A temporary order, she called it. Effective at 9:30 this morning. The words hung in the air, so precise, so final. Signed by Judge Harland himself. And just like that, my little Charity was a bird uncaged. She is no longer your ward, the lawyer purred. Try to stop her, and those clumsy paws of yours will be bound in steel, before the noon bell even rings. I watched Lester's vacant eyes finally flicker with comprehension. He scrambled for the last page, his fingers fumbling like a panicked insect. He saw the judge's scrawl, and the document fell from his grasp, as if the ink itself was acid, searing his flesh. Beautiful. Ah, Reed. Theatrics were not his style. No shouting. He simply reached into that second, more interesting folder, and the real performance began. He laid the documents down, one by one, a priest setting out sacrificial tools. The pace was deliciously slow, letting the sound of each thick sheet slapping against the glass table echo in that perfect, suffocating silence. First, the bank slip. $8,000, a tidy little sum. The memo line, a little knife twist. Knox private school deposit. Little Knox, who had never seen the inside of a private school in his life. Such clumsy lies. Next, the wire transfer confirmation. The numbers glowed with betrayal. $12,000 sent to Cordeline, Chevrolet, for a pristine white Tahoe, a chariot registered to his precious Victoria Frost. I could almost hear Charity's silent scream. The same month, he told her that a bit of metal for her teeth was too much to ask. Then came the resort bill, a reservation in Los Cabos, $43,000, the cost of a small kingdom of sand and sun. 4 adults, 2 children, all for Christmas week. The Christmas she was left behind, a ghost in her own home, surviving on stale cereal while they mailed back mocking little pictures of paradise, postcards of water the color of her tears, and still the lawyer wasn't finished. Oh, no. A boat loan naturally in Lester's name, hockey equipment, for his precious equipment, and the travel team fees that, so poetically, amounted to more in a single season than my dear Charity ever saw, in 4 miserable years. And my favorite part, a casino cash, advance slip from the Bellagio, signed with such a confident flourish, using the trust's own debit card. Every single page fluttered down like a death sentence delivered on a whisper. $212,000, 12 years. Every last dollar siphoned away while my Charity shivered in second-hand coats, conditioned to ask for absolutely nothing. And right on cue, Vicky slinks in through the garage, as if summoned by the recitation of her sins. The performance was in full swing. There she stood, frozen inside. The archway, a picture of false wellness in her lavender yoga clothes. Her little stainless steel water bottle began to tremble, the ice inside rattling like a maraca of pure panic. She began. I never signed a thing. Oh, the denial. It was a pathetic stammer, her voice fracturing on each syllable. Reed, my perfect instrument of chaos, finally turned his gaze upon her. Your signature, appears on 14 of these withdrawals. Mrs. Frost, page 27, should you need to. Refresh your memory. And there it was. Her knees gave way. Her hand shot out, grasping the doorframe to keep herself from collapsing entirely. Then, from the stairs, the slow creak of weight on old, groaning wood. Little Knox appeared, a sleepy soldier in his Gonzaga Bulldog's pajama pants, his hair a mess, his eyes wide with a child's confusion. He scanned the damning pile of papers, his father's face, a mask of ash, his mother, a broken doll propped up against the wall, and the stranger in the suit, who must have looked like a ghost from his own bleak future. Me. His jaw fell open, a silent, pathetic "oh," perhaps to form a question he already knew the answer to, but only a choked gasp escaped. He just stared, his eyes darting across the paper trail of his own pathetic appetites, every new gaming console, every lavish ski trip, laid bare like a dissected animal, every pair of $300 sneakers he ever paraded around in, now a nail in his own coffin. I watched Holly close the briefcase, the sound of it a sharp, satisfying crack of judgment. "The Spokane County Sheriff's Civil Division," she purred, her voice a silken threat, "is on standby. A delicious formality. We'd prefer this, stay peaceful." And then Lester, the little king of his cardboard castle, finally found his voice. It was a wretched, shredded thing, the sound of a man seeing the abyss open beneath him. "You can't prove any of this," he rasped, the predictable bluster of a cornered rat. "I'll fight. It. I'll drag this through every court. So boring. So expected. You'll lose." Reed's voice cut through the noise, quiet and absolute as a blade. "And when you do," he continued, "the district attorney gets the forgery file. 18 counts, minimum. A beautiful number. We're offering you a choice to keep this civil. Take it." Then he turned to her. "To my charity." He held out his hand, a gesture of a savior, and she took it. I saw her small hand disappear into his palm warm, calloused. A working man's hand. He was trying to offer her a stability I could never permit, a steadiness that was a direct challenge to the chaos I had planned for her. She grabbed the duffel bag she'd tucked away, a pathetic bundle of hope. I could almost picture its contents from my vantage point. 3 hoodies, 2 pairs of jeans, and her mother's little lockbox, her only real treasure, swaddled in a t-shirt. She walked toward the door, not even a glance back. Behind her, the fool Lester began to bellow his empty threats. Lawyers, lawsuits, ruin. The impotent rage of a dethroned tyrant. The words chased them, hounding them down the hallway, but they dissolved into nothing, losing all their power with every step she took away from him, and for now, toward another. I watched Reed open the back door of the waiting Range Rover, a chariot to her next gilded cage. She slipped into the back of the car, a shadow swallowed by shadows. Holly, the loyal dog, took her post up front. My driver knew the protocol. The vehicle glided from the curb as if on a current, no instructions needed, none given. The sky bled snow, a relentless, suffocating white. I watched her silhouette as she stared back at the only cage she had ever known, watching it dissolve behind that sterile curtain. For the first time in 12 years, I imagined she felt something other than cold. The same snow came down over Spokane that night, a city oblivious to the performance about to begin. The Spokane First Bank charity auction, a perfect stage. Inside the Davenport Grand Ballroom, the light from the crystal chandeliers shattered everywhere, a beautiful, expensive illusion. 300 souls in black tie drifted between the tables, their eyes grazing over the silent auction's pathetic offerings signed Gonzaga. Basketballs, weekend getaways to the Coeur d'Alene Resort, a private dinner with the city's mayor, every last dollar supposedly for the day for Children's Hospital. The banners were such a touching, fraudulent detail, and there sat Lester, still masquerading under the title of branch president. The board was still hesitating, a collection of cowards. The lawsuit I orchestrated was still coiled, waiting for its moment to strike. So he sat there, the guest of honor at his own execution, at the head table in his ill-fitting tuxedo, flashing a smile for the cameras, pressing the flesh as if his world hadn't already ended. He was a ghost, utterly unaware the lead sponsor of his little party had been replaced by me. I had quietly pledged $300,000. The very week his precious invitations were mailed. The bank president himself had phoned, his voice syrupy with gratitude, to thank me personally, too blinded by the sum to ever ask why. I watched from the shadows, amused that the great Seattle shipping billionaire pretended to care about some provincial Spokane fundraiser. Then she appeared, a prize on Reed's arm, poured into a floor-length navy silk gown he'd had sent to her like a brand. It was delivered the day before. I know. Heads swiveled, phones rose like weapons, and whispers slithered behind them, across the polished marble. He paraded her from table to table, the old wolf greeting his pack, his so-called old acquaintances. The performance was always the same. "This is," he'd begin, "my daughter, Charity." I saw the gears turning behind their eyes. Some recognized the name Frost and did the cold calculus in their heads. The others just offered those vacant, predatory smiles. So polite. A few dared to ask where she went to school, trying to catalogue her. She answered with a sliver of truth. For the first time in her life, she said, "How quaint. I'm finishing the semester online while I settle the guardianship transfer." A pretty term for a transaction. The MC's tap on the the microphone broke the spell. Dinner was over. The lights fell, cloaking the room for the live auction. The main event. Reed was, of course, scheduled to give the sponsors thank you. A prelude just before the truly big ticket items were trotted out. I saw him squeeze her hand once, a gesture of ownership, before he climbed the 3 steps to the stage like a king to his throne. The room went silent for him. Reed took the microphone, swept his gaze over the crowd, and unleashed that easy, practiced smile, the one that closed 8-figure deals. "Good evening, Spokane." His voice dripped with false sincerity. "Tonight, we've already raised an incredible amount for the Children's Hospital." The irony was delicious, and I'm proud to be a piece of the performance. But before the bidding starts, on some trivial mountain getaway, he has a little surprise. Someone I'd like you to meet. His gaze swiveled, a predator locking onto its mark, to her. And she rose, the little puppet, from their table near the front. She ascended the steps as if walking to a throne instead of a slaughter. The spotlight speared her, and 300 pairs of vacant eyes fixated on the new spectacle. Their little screens lifted in unison, a digital tide. Then came Reed's grand pronouncement. His voice, so practiced and smooth, declared, "This is my daughter, Charity Frost." The name hung in the air, a curse spoken aloud. 16 years ago, he confessed, I was conveniently ignorant of her existence. 4 months ago, she crawled out of the woodwork to find me. And tonight, I have the privilege of standing here to tell all of you how profoundly proud I am to finally call her mine. A delicious, audible shudder of shock swept through the room. Perfect. And there, at the head table, was my dear Lester. He shot to his feet so abruptly, his chair screeched back in protest. A pathetic, clumsy gesture. The crystal in his trembling hand gave way, and the red Cabernet, it bled across, the pristine white linen seeping down to the carpet like a promise of what's to come. From the back, a voice carried, a stage whisper for half the room to feast upon. "Isn't that the branch president's niece or daughter? Hold on." The confusion was exquisite, but Reed, the master of ceremonies, droned on, painting his charity's life as some tragic opera about being a burden. How utterly predictable. She was denied the basics, he claimed, while the money, supposedly meant for her future, was squandered on frivolous things like vacations and cars. But oh, she never surrendered. She fought, he said. She unearthed the truth. And now she's home. The whispers in the room began to shift, to churn into something more. A wave of whispers rippled through the room, a sound I savored. The little screens, once hidden, now bloomed like fireflies in the dark. They were filming without shame, a digital mob eager to capture the kill, And Lester's face, it was a canvas, cycling through the violent red of rage and the stark white of terror. He took a single, clumsy step toward the stage, a wounded animal. Then another, a pathetic attempt to charge his own public execution. I watched as Vicky, the ever-present puppeteer, sank her claws into his sleeve, her lips moving in a silent, venomous hiss. The words were lost to the crowd, but the desperation in her grip was a language I understood perfectly. On stage, Reed played his part, draping an arm around her shoulders in a perfect gesture of ownership. "Thank you, Spokane," he boomed, his voice a calculated performance, "for giving me the chance to stand here with my daughter tonight." The word hung in the air, a perfectly thrown dagger. Then, the masterful pivot. "Let's make this the best auction yet." He handed her the microphone. A scepter passed from one monarch to another. She took it, this little pawn, to begin the hollow ceremony of the paddle raise. I watched her hand closely. Not a single tremor. Impressive. Before their feet even touched the ballroom floor, the poison was already spreading through the city's digital veins. That night, the Spokesman Review had chosen its sacrifice. Their homepage was a monument to the moment, a single, perfect photograph. Lester Frost, frozen in his disgrace, a clumsy stumble as red wine bled across the white linen like a fresh wound. And above him, on the stage, Reed Lawson and his newfound daughter, Charity. They stood bathed in a celestial spotlight, the very picture of righteous victory. The headline was a brutal, bold stroke: billionaire. Shipping magnate claims daughter. Oh, the delicious finality of that word, claims, in dramatic reveal at Bank Charity Gala. And the final, pathetic epitaph: local executive, left reeling. The city was feasting on his carcass. The comments section was a piranha frenzy before their limousine even pulled away from the curb. And so, the next act began, the civil trial, a different kind of theater. It was a fittingly cold April morning at the Spokane County Superior Court. I can still recall the scent of Courtroom 3, that mix of decaying wood and the sharp bite of chemical cleansers, a scent that promised a sterile judgment it could never deliver. The gallery was sparse, maybe 20 souls, flies gathering for a show they didn't yet comprehend. The gallery was a pathetic collection of vultures, a couple of reporters, some pencil pusher from the bank, and the nosy neighbors, their faces alight with the memory of that ridiculous gala video. And there I sat, the star of their little show, at the defendant's table. This navy suit, a testament to my supposed crimes, felt like a shroud hanging on a frame that had shed pounds under the weight of this betrayal these past 4 months. 2 rows back, Vicky, my Vicky, sat frozen, a monument to silent suffering, clutching a single, dry tissue as if it were a rosary. A useless gesture. Knox, at least, was spared this theater. They told me school kept him away, a small mercy. Then she made her grand entrance. Holly, with her 4 bankers' boxes of lies stacked high, on a squeaking metal cart, the sheer audacity of it. She pushed it past the bar as if she were delivering milk and eggs, not my ruin. I saw the bailiff's eyebrow twitch in amusement. Even he could see the absurdity. Judge Harland, a man with ice in his veins, took his throne at 9 o'clock sharp. No jury of my peers, no one to see the human story, just a cold, financial calculation. Holly's opening statement was not a speech. It was an assassination, swift and brutal. "Your Honor," she began, her voice a scalpel, "the plaintiff will prove." She would show how for 12 years of my life, the defendant, this monster she was painting me to be, acting as a simple trustee, had supposedly betrayed a trust created for the eternal benefit of St. Charity Frost, that I had systematically misappropriated, as she so clinically put it, a sum of $212,000, all for so-called personal use. Every cent, she claimed, a crime. Every decision I made, a violation of some dusty Washington law, RCW 1198, 8.078, just numbers meant to cage me. And their demands? Not just the money back. They wanted full restitution with a parasitic statutory interest of 8%, and, of course, her precious attorney fees. My lawyer, bless his incompetent heart, stood and tried to speak of reality, of family expenses, of the reasonable discretion I was owed. The judge let him speak for a whole 30 seconds before slicing him down. Save it for evidence. The words echoed. The trap had been sprung. Counsel. And so the performance began, with Holly calling my little Charity to the stage first, the stand in a simple grey blazer Reed had so thoughtfully selected for her. The perfect costume of a wounded bird. She swore the oath, her small hand trembling just so. The clerk handed her the microphone, a prop to amplify her carefully rehearsed sorrow, and the opening line was delivered, a request to detail the squalor of her childhood. She recited the list, each item a calculated blow, the second-hand clothes, the ghosts of other people's lives, from a place called Plato's Closet. The pathetic detail of having no phone until she could afford one herself at 15. No trips, no little rewards, no allowance. And as she spoke her lines, Holly, the director, began the slideshow. The receipts bloomed on the screen behind her, each one a testament to Lester's pathetic, greedy little soul. His signature on a check for a flat screen television, appearing in the very same month he'd told his daughter they were too poor for new shoes. Then, the main act, the flood of bank statements, those 4 little boxes transformed into 400 pages of digital damnation, projected one by agonizing one, a $5,000 withdrawal, neatly labeled orthodontic expenses. A beautiful lie, especially since her teeth had always been perfectly straight. A $22,000 wire transfer, whisking someone away to a Hawaiian paradise, while she, of course, was left behind with a neighbor. And my personal favorite, a $38,000 cashier's check made out to a glittering jewelry store. For the very diamond earrings I'd watched Vicky flaunt at the gala, every damning page was magnified. The crudely forged trustee, signatures filling the screen like a confession. And Lester, he simply stared forward, his jaw clenched into a knot of stone, so tight that a single muscle spasmed beneath his skin. After 2 perfect hours, Holly rested. The defense, predictably, had nothing. They called no witnesses. Lester's pathetic excuse for an attorney pleaded for a plated recess. The judge, unmoved, denied him. The closing was, in a word, exquisite. Holly painted him not as a father, but as a thief who preyed on his own child. A little stray he tried to pass off as his own daughter. Their fate was sealed on paper, an undeniable web of their own making. It was time to award the full measure of their greed, plus the bitter taste of interest and fees. Their defense was a pathetic whisper. Reasonable family expenses. I watched Judge Harland slowly remove his glasses, the gesture of a man whose patience had been bled dry. He'd seen enough of their hollow performance. Judgment for my little bird, the plaintiff. $212,000. The principal, with a cruel 8% annual interest drawn from the very date of each theft, and a tidy $48,000 to pay for the privilege of being exposed. The total was due within 30 days. The case closed. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed like a gunshot, marking the start of their new, ruined lives. The bank, of course, fired Lester that very next Monday. The official letter was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, citing a loss of public trust and the violation of fiduciary ethics. Such delicate words for such a grubby little man. I pictured him clearing his desk, a ghost in his own life, long before the lunch hour. A mere 3 weeks passed, and then the most beautiful notice was nailed to the door of the South Hill house. The very bank that had fattened him up for years came to collect its pound of flesh. I saw Vicky, frantically stuffing trinkets into her SUV, retreating from her castle to her mother's double-wide trailer 20 miles east of Airway Heights. And then Knox, a desperate text to Charity, sent from some cheap, disposable flip phone. "Sis, I swear I didn't know any of this." "I'm sorry." The coward's last plea. I watched her read it, her thumb hesitating for a heartbeat over the reply, a flicker of the old her. Then she erased his existence and blocked the number. Yes, that same week, I saw her back in the courthouse. She stood there again. this time for a beautifully simple name change hearing. 10 minutes, and not a single soul to object. Opposition. The judge's pen scratched, sealing the little charade. And Charity. Frost was wiped from the official record, a name they thought they could bury. Lawson. A flimsy new identity was stamped upon her, with him, Reed Lawson, as her guardian. Lawson. I watched her step out into the spring sunlight, a pale imitation of rebirth. She moved with a lightness that was utterly false, a desperate performance of freedom, as if she hadn't felt that way since she was 4. But winter always returns, and another one descended, upon their little sanctuary at Lake Kane. I saw her through my lens, a silhouette on the wide cedar balcony. She was lost inside one of his old university hoodies, wrapping herself in his scent, his protection. Her eyes were fixed on the lake as it froze, a perfect metaphor for the trap she was in. A thin blanket of powder snow, a fragile illusion, 45 minutes from the city, east of Spokane, just far enough for them to feel safe, far enough to believe no one from her real life would ever find them. He materialized beside her then, the ever-present protector. In his hands, 2 mugs of cocoa, a sickeningly domestic scene. He passed one to her. He didn't have to ask. He thought he knew her so well. They drank, their silence a fragile bubble. I watched the steam from their breath curl and dance between them, only to be devoured by the vast, uncaring cold. Then, he began his little project. That January, he started teaching her to drive. Not on the roads, of course. The ice made the roads too honest about their dangers, even for a beginner. No, he chose the frozen lake itself, a beautiful, treacherous lie. He marked a wide, tame oval with bright orange cones, a pathetic little racetrack. Then he settled into the passenger seat of that beast of a Suburban, and I watched as she crept forward at a timid 15 miles an hour. Her laughter, a sharp, brittle sound across the ice every time the back end of the truck slid out of her control. Easy on the wheel, his voice would carry, a useless mantra. Trust the surface, he told her. Oh, the irony. Some nights I watch them and I watched them in the long nights, shadows flickering in that grand library he'd fashioned for her. A cage of books, stretching from the polished floor to the ornate ceiling. The fireplace, a theatrical touch, crackled with a life of its own. And he would perform, weaving his little stories for his captive audience of one. Tales of a summer in Seattle, of the moment he supposedly met her mother. A clumsy fiction about spilled coffee on his shoes in some tourist trap cafe. How she'd laughed instead of apologizing, a detail designed to make her seem charmingly rebellious. He painted a portrait of a woman she could barely recall, a ghost who loved jazz and despised cilantro. He gave this phantom life, this impossible coolness. A shark at the pool table, he claimed, after precisely 2 drinks. And Charity, my dear Charity, she devoured every word like a starving child, desperately assembling the puzzle of a woman from his carefully selected pieces. Her phone, a relic of her old life, remained dark and silent most days. That girl, Vicky, made 2 pathetic attempts to reach her from a blocked number. I watched her listen to the ringtone, a faint, cruel smile on her face as she let it die. The boy, Knock, sent one final, desperate plea from someone else's device. A long, whining apology filled with hollow promises he could never keep. Empty vows of repayment in some distant, imaginary future. She granted it a single glance before banishing the entire conversation to digital oblivion. Then came the vultures, the classmates from her past, suddenly so very concerned. They were blocked, of course, their feigned affection dismissed without a second thought. The moment that first clawing heart emoji appeared, they ceased to exist. It wasn't hatred I saw in her eyes. It was something far more satisfying. It was the cold, clean realization that she owed those ghosts absolutely nothing. Spring came, and with it, the gilded envelope from the University of Washington, the Fulbright scholarship, a golden ticket to her next chapter, the Foster School of Business, rewarded for her academic merit. And, oh, the delicious irony of it all, the essay that sealed her fate. A naive little treatise on fiduciary fraud and second chances. She has no idea what's coming. I watched Reed's eyes crawl across the page, his silhouette framed by the window. A long, theatrical silence hung in the air, thick with unspoken platitudes. Then came the embrace, a clumsy, predictable gesture meant to absorb her pain, a pathetic pantomime of comfort, where no words would suffice. She still called him Reed, a delicious crack in their little domestic facade. The word Dad was a mountain she couldn't climb, a role he hadn't earned, and he, the patient fool, never forced the issue, letting the illusion fester. I saw it, of course, the one time the words slipped from her lips by accident, some triviality about a ride, a mundane detail in her new, fragile life. His smile was a grotesque thing, stretching his face until his eyes swam with moisture. He quickly looked away, pretending he hadn't heard the one thing he craved, and she convinced herself this was it, the feeling of being home. How naive. Some nights, I watch her perform her little ritual with the metal lockbox. The letter from her mother is there, worn soft and pathetic from her constant touch. She pores over it, a desperate soul seeking absolution from a ghost, tracing the faded ink, pretending to unearth some profound truth from the scribbles. She's building a new gospel for herself, a flimsy set of rules. Family, she thinks. It's not the blood in your veins, she tells herself, staring into the dark. It's not even the ones who fed and clothed you in their cold, sterile house. No. Her family is the one who chooses to remain when the ugliness is laid bare. The one who doesn't flee when the monster she hides finally shows its face. The one who shows up day after day, pretending not to keep a tally of her flaws. The one who looks at the wreckage of her past, the darkest chapters of her story, and whispers the sweet lie, "That doesn't change anything. That doesn't diminish the value I have assigned to you." And Reed acts out this choice every morning, a tedious, repetitive performance. In every cup of cocoa on the balcony, in every staged moment of paternal care, every lesson on a frozen lake, a perfect metaphor for the foundation of their bond. The ones who spent 12 years showing her the truth that she was a commodity, they simply proved too weak to hold on to their investment. They forfeited their claim. I watched the exact moment the lesson finally took root, the day they showed her that currency is the only truth, that it weighed more than she ever would. Now she's 18, a new player on the board. The trust fund, that golden leash, is finally hers to hold, and she's running straight into the heart of Seattle this fall to study the very architecture of her own cage, finance. It's delicious. She wants to learn the language of the gods who smote her. Every broken rule, every whispered loophole they slip through. She's building an arsenal of knowledge, thinking she can shield the world's other little lambs. So quaint. And I listen, always listening, as she practices her new identity. When the question of her origins comes, she chokes back the name South Hill, as if she could ever truly escape it. Instead, she speaks of a house, a shack by the lake, where some sentimental fool whispered fairy tales in her ear. Fairy tales about what a home is supposed to feel like. Blood doesn't get to write your ending, she tells herself. Oh, my sweet, naive girl. It's the ones who stay that she clings to now. We'll see how tightly they hold on.